Morning, everybody. We're going to give it another minute or so to let everybody join us. Or good afternoon, actually. Okay, everybody. Again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us. So happy to have you here at the Agilov PwC presentation of CLMs as a must-have, how to realize the mission-critical benefits of CLM. I'm joined today by some wonderful colleagues from PwC, and I'm going to just go ahead and actually I need to introduce myself. I am Allison Hart, Product Marketing Manager at Agiloft. And I am also joined again by my PwC colleagues, and I'm going to hand it over to Alex Short. Alex.
Hi, everybody. Lovely to be here, and thank you, Alison. So you've got Alex Short here. I'm a director in PwC's commercial control practice in London. So I have spent the last 10 years or so supporting organizations design and implement contract management and commercial management functions of the future. And I'm delighted to be here to share some of our learnings and experience with implementing CLM programs. And I'm going to hand over to one of my wonderful colleagues, Erika.
Thank you, Alex. So my name is Erika Orr, and I would say Contract Lifecycle Management, or CLM, is my absolute bread and butter. I think it's so underrated and underutilized, and it's a topic I know that Alex and I agree on, and we work regularly together to support our clients needing greater controls and using CLM as a key lever for this, whether you're currently building a business case or needing to optimize your current CLM solution. Now, before we discuss why CLM is an absolute essential, I just want to frame what we mean by CLM and where true value actually lies. So I have been told that my obsession with using the Monzo banking app is very millennial of me, and they recently launched a new functionality that automatically sorts my salary into the different budget pots that I need, so bills, holidays, etc. And I thought this is great. This is going to save me about 5 minutes a month doing this manual sorting process. But would I consider that to be the most valuable feature? Actually, probably not. The most valuable feature is actually the trends and insights functionality that tells me categorically that I'm spending far too much money on Zara and Deliveroo, and that I have forgotten to unsubscribe myself from a very expensive exercise app that's about to charge me in an upcoming standing order. And maybe, yes, it is very millennial of me, but who wouldn't want simplicity, transparency, and control over their finances? And equally, who wouldn't want simplicity, transparency, and control over their contracts? We focus so much on the left-hand side in the orange here, which are your pre-execution activities, and streamlining the process of negotiation, review, and approvals, and neglect the fact that lifecycle management also means managing the contract once it's actually operational, having visibility over key obligations, and driving process efficiencies through proactive management of deliverables and performance. Now, Alex, we've worked together on quite a few examples of the key drivers for needing greater controls in post-execution. What would be the headliners for you?
So I think for me, it's really all about how an organization wants to frame its relationship with another organization. So in that sense, there's a lot of criticality, a lot of risk, a lot of reliance put on that relationship. And I think that's moving from being something that people have done as part and parcel of their day-to-day business, and now are wanting so much more control, so much more understanding of those relationships. And some of that is driven just by organizations wanting better performance and better control. And some of it is really driven by external parties now showing organizations that it is unacceptable for them to not be able to demonstrate that transparency and control. So we're seeing a real market trend at the moment where organizations are looking at contract lifecycle management as really something that they must address, as opposed to something that could help them sort of a little bit in the future. And in places like financial services, this is really where external regulators are saying it's a vital part of your business continuity, that you've got the right protections in place with your contracts. There's plenty of legislation, whether it's EBA, whether it's DORA, whether it's SS221. You know, these regs from whether the EU or the UK and similar things around the world are there, designed to make sure that that transparency and control is present as part of an organization's control framework. And then outside of that, it also leaks into everything to do with ESG, whether it's SSRD reporting, and these are all kind of supply chain focused things. But for me, it also is on the revenue side, where we're seeing external auditors now starting to challenge organizations on the transparency and control that they have over their individual transactions. Can I justify this revenue? Can you provide me with a cast iron guarantee that revenue that you've registered is linked back to a specific contract, is linked back to a specific transaction that's on that contract, and therefore if it was ever challenged in the future, you'd be able to validate it. These are some of the no longer nice to haves. These are musts from either your regulators or your external auditors and validators. So we're seeing that real trend in the market where organizations are picking this up as a complete necessity. And I think one of the things that we're seeing here, and it links to Erika's point on the sort of left-hand side of that previous diagram, is that as you try and answer some of these regulatory challenges, some of your auditors' challenges, you need to have more than just a repository. You need to have a much more complicated CLM solution. And that in itself poses some more challenges for organizations looking at these programs. So Erika, I think I'm going to hand back to you here. What are some of those technology considerations and what's driving some of that complexity?
Thanks, Alex. So there is a direct correlation, I would say, between a more mature CLM process powered by more advanced functionality and unlocking more strategic value. And it all depends on what your business actually needs, because optimizing your CLM process looks different for everyone. Now, let's imagine, for example, you're building a house. At the most basic level, you need a solid structure like your walls, doors, windows, having a roof over your head. You'll then want to furnish it with some basic furniture so that you can actually live there. And with contracting, this is like having a basic central repository to house your contracts and basic workflows to get you from drafting through to execution. And then maybe you want to start equipping your house with all the things that you'll need to deal with different situations, like having a toolbox for your DIY projects or spare bedding for your guests when they stay over. It's always good to be prepared. And with contracting, having approved template and clause libraries with alternative or fallback provisions are considered more intermediate functionality that helps you stay prepared for different negotiation scenarios, whilst also relieving the burden of your legal team. And then if you really want to level up your home, you'd probably be looking at some smart home technology. So one hub that integrates things like your lighting, your security, and appliances to give you remote access, visibility, and control into what's going on in your house, and also what might need to be turned off or on to save you some money. And in the contracting world, this is all about having visibility of what you've signed up to and integrating with other systems like your ERP or CRM platforms to give you the full picture. We often assume that searching the language of the contract is good enough, but actually the contractual language itself doesn't actually tell you whether you've met your obligations or whether your supplier has met theirs. Now, Alison, I know we were talking about a great example of this a few days ago about how critical it can be to integrate a CLM with other data sources.
Yes, absolutely. We have some really great examples of capabilities much beyond just being a repository, if that's all your CLM does. For example, we have a fintech company that works with a very large government agency, and they've integrated with their TPRM solution, third-party risk management solution. And it's great the use case we've talked about with our procurement point of contact there is the quickness of the data that she can get. Of course, being highly regulated, they get audited on a very regular basis. And before, the auditors come in, they request information, and it takes them a while to get all the content that they need, all the data that they're looking for. She said now with the Agilov system, the fact is she can be on the phone with the auditor, pull up the data. It doesn't matter the amount that has to be churned through. She said it'll come up in just moments. So the fact that this integration into her TPRM makes it easier to answer her auditor's questions just gives a big sigh of relief for her. We also have a great use case story with the AI. Again, capabilities much beyond just being a repository. This is actually Rush Medical University out of Chicago, and they have utilized AI in the background. The legal department was really bogged down with trying to prioritize all the different contracts coming in for perusal and for to see what they, where they needed to go to be reviewed for what level of scrutiny. And so AI in the background, once the contract comes in, it immediately assesses, where does this need to be assigned? Is it something just like a snowplow for the parking lot so that can go easily into straight to signature? Or is it maybe for a $5,000 a week consultant that needs to go for probably just a paralegal? Or, is it some type of enterprise agreement that really needs the whole, the legal team to have reviewed? So AI in the background immediately assigns it. Legal never has to worry about where does this go and who needs to look at it. There's a manual override of, oh, no, this needs a little more scrutiny than that. But so, yeah, some really great examples of things that are answered out of their CLM beyond just being just a repository. But, Alex, with more complex requirements, do you really need a more complex platform? I mean, wouldn't that create more challenges?
I think that I think is the real sort of the crux of this challenge that's facing organizations, is that in order to answer some of these regulatory drivers, as you were just describing some of those great examples, Alison, the ability to pull out and demonstrate that the right third-party risk management protections are included in a contract and show that to an auditor, that is a complicated use case. It requires lots of different modules. It requires interactions with different systems, different users, but that's what regulators and auditors are asking for these days. So organizations are faced with that challenge of, we need to go and do a complex program. We need to satisfy the regulatory driver, but actually delivery of complex programs can be really hard. And I think even just getting them going in the first place can often be extremely difficult for some of our clients. So, starting from developing the business case, we're seeing organizations really struggle to create the right business case that supports what is a quite complicated change program. How do we get all of the right parts of the organization to feed into this program to deliver on a benefits case that has a huge amount of monetary value, but also has a huge amount of regulatory necessity? It becomes more complicated. And I think a lot of organizations we see struggle just to kind of create that and communicate it in a way to their senior stakeholders so that they can buy into it. Longer payback periods are never the things that your finance officers want to see. And we're there as an organization, often supporting people to break through some of those barriers, but we'll come on to that a bit more later. And then I think the sort of second thing that we're really seeing out there at the moment is organizations having got going with their programs, getting stuck in some of the complexity that is created by trying to answer some of these challenges. So, again, going back to that same example, in a program where you want to have that clear link between a TPRM risk assessment and actually your CLM contracting module, that's going to involve engaging a much wider group of stakeholders. It's a whole program team around TPRM. It's a whole set of risk domain owners. It's a set of legal folk that are going to be involved in supporting how those protections are included in the contracts. you've got to engage a much larger community and satisfy a much broader set of requirements. And therefore, in the actual program delivery, we're seeing organizations struggle with some of those challenges and get those big groups of stakeholders all to agree and align on what that next phase needs to be and what's going to be delivered in the current release. And for us, that's a massive issue out there, because ultimately the stakes are really high and organizations can't have a situation where these programs fail to deliver on those business cases. So, I mean, given the sort of stakes that we're saying, Erika, what are the kind of areas that we, or advice that we can give to organizations that are facing these sorts of challenges at the moment?
So I would say there are three key pillars for a successful CLM transformation, with number one being business ownership, number two being your wider business transformation alignment, and the third is ensuring that your CLM is people-centric. We have seen some clients only apply one or two of these lenses and then have to deal with poor adoption of their CLM solutions later on. So if we start with business ownership, this is all about having buy-in, strong sponsorship, and stakeholder representation. We had a client who brought us in after their IT and innovation team selected their CLM technology without actually consulting the likes of legal, risk, and procurement, very much like Alex's example. And obviously their key contracting process owners, which, as you can imagine, did not sit well with them, given they didn't have the opportunity to evaluate the solution or provide their detailed requirements. And then secondly, I would say wider business transformation alignment is really critical, because CLM isn't a one-dimensional activity that sits on its own. It actually underpins key business processes that allow organizations to operate more efficiently, mitigate risks, and achieve better business outcomes. So, for example, maybe your procurement team is trying to manage supplier contracts more efficiently by tracking volume discounts, rebates, and performance. Or maybe your sales teams are trying to manage customer contracts by reducing sales cycle times and maximizing revenue during the renewal windows. Or, as Alex has already mentioned, the business is under greater regulatory scrutiny, and there is a need to proactively identify and mitigate risks, as well as comply with reporting standards to avoid legal penalties, and also ensuring you protect the company's reputation. And the last bit of the puzzle, I would say, is putting user experience at the heart of any CLM design and ensuring the solution is simple and intuitive to use. In a lot of buy-side procurement-focused implementations, it's quite common to want to have an upfront contract request form for the business users to fill out. But if you end up with about 50 to 100 legal and compliance questions that need to be answered, well, firstly, this does happen a lot, but your business users will then end up trying to just circumvent the process to get things done quicker, which is not what you want. Now, Alex, you've got a very recent example of why these are really important with a client actually currently on their own CLM transformation journey.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's actually, I'll bring a couple of examples up here, actually, rather than just one individual one. So, first and foremost, there's an ongoing implementation program where an organization is trying to deliver on some of these complex requirements, but is being challenged on the basis of as I said, the sort of benefits payback being delayed because of having to essentially wait for other transformational programs to deliver as well, so they can meet those sort of joined up objectives. And in that particular case, what is giving the finance teams and the budget holders more comfort is because that program has got a real laser focus on delivering quick wins and incremental bits of benefit as they go through that program. So they're looking at, for example, now we've gathered all of our contracts. What can we actually do with all of that information, even before we put it into the CLM system? Can we start to draw some insights out of those contracts that either help us get better value out of those contracts or help us address some of our risk weaknesses around their response to data privacy concerns, which is a major thing for them at the moment. So that program in particular is managing to ride out some of that challenge by making sure that it delivers value all the way from day one. Quick wins. And then the second one for me is another program that's, again, in a similar situation where there's multiple transformation programs that are all delivering on similar objectives at the same time. But what that program has done incredibly well is it's been able to show how its program enables benefits outside of the core things that you would expect to have from a CLM platform. So, for example, there is a billing transformation program going on to make sure that the organization can bill faster, bill more accurately. But what the billing transformation really needs is really accurate commercial information. It needs to know what is in those contracts. And without that information, the billing transformation can't deliver on its benefits case. And there's several other integrated different parts, which the program has been really successful at effectively quantifying what those secondary benefits are. And therefore, by operating as a joined up transformation agenda of a series of different programs, all contributing to a much broader business case, they've been able to continue to push on through the challenge, maintain their source of funding, and make sure that everybody within the organization is clear on what that end state objective is going to be. So I think there's really different ways that programs can address some of these things. And it's all to do with really making sure that they've got benefits at the heart. And as Erika was saying, that they're also thinking about the user experience. So now, Alison, I guess it wouldn't be a webinar of this nature without going back and looking at the product in some way, shape or form. So I think you've got some really helpful little demonstrations of that maturity of the roadmap of the different functionalities. And I think as you go through them, Erika and I would love to sort of discuss some of the challenges that we see organizations facing just as they go through that maturity journey. So Alison, back over to you.
Sure. Great. Thank you, Alex. Yeah, so I have a couple little video vignettes that will give us a sense. This one is what it's really showing is relationships of once you do get your contracts into the CLM, what it can show is the different governance and dependencies, the contract dependencies. So if you're trying to figure out, I'm inside of this one contract and what was the parent, which child is this of which parent, what you're able to see is which level of, how many dependencies are there? If I make a change to this contract, how many other contracts will it impact? What's the level up? You can also see the number of contracts, the number of layers within the system. So this is very helpful once you get your contracts into the system to show you all the different relationships and dependencies that each one relies on. Erika, I think you had some insight there for the story there.
Yeah, I think what I would say is don't underestimate the task of getting your contracts to this stage. So getting them digitized, migrated and centralized so that you can benefit from this kind of relationship mapping. I was speaking to a colleague a few weeks ago about, the recent Gen AI hype, and she said it's all about IA before AI, which means getting your information architecture right before even thinking of leveraging more advanced capability like AI, because the outcomes you get are dependent on how robust your data set is. And although we would consider obviously having a central repository a must-have foundational part of CLM, it can often be the most challenging to get right, especially when you have multiple contract repositories and file formats sitting across SharePoints or someone's filing cabinet somewhere. And sometimes even when all your contracts are digitized, there's no mapping like you see here on screen, between your parent and child agreements and subsequent amendments. So Alison, let's say we have all that in place. How can any kind of subsequent changes and amendments actually be managed in practice?
Sure.
Alison, if I may, just before you go on to the next bit, I mean, I just sharing a really recent example from my side on this front.
Please.
Some of the challenges around just getting that data correct. One of the key issues that we see is also being able to get get information in this nicely filed structure as you've got here, which is obviously, as Erika said, foundational, but then mapping it to some of the other data sources that you have that you need to know about your contracts. So one of the massive challenges one of our clients is facing at the moment is being able to look at its own master data around the transactions, what it has on record for payments, for the like, and be able to make sure that that data set is clean and linked to the contract. So you can see that clear link between organization, payment, and organization contract. And that in itself is something that I see months in programs getting lost to, frankly, and really poor adoption further down the line if people can't pull the right financial data through the system into against each of the individual contract lines. So it's not just about the specific contracts themselves, it's the broader data architecture here as well, that, to Erika's point first, brilliantly made IA before AI.
Yes, very good point. I love that, actually. Yeah, so once you do get everything in there, once you've gone through the challenges of getting all your data inside of a CLM, well, that's great, but don't you want to keep everything inside of there? So if you have comments, if you want to, ask legal or ask procurement or ask finance a question about this contract, well, you're going to go to either email, you're going to go to Slack, some other IM system, your Teams, and so now this communication sitting outside of the record. Well, that doesn't do you any good. What we have created here is the fact that you can keep all of your communications right inside of the record connected to the contract. So you're not losing anything. You have all of the information that you need, all the questions and the answers, all within the record and tied to that contract. So that's really helpful once you do get everything inside this one repository, fabulous repository.
And again, here on this key piece of functionality, we advise our organizations that are going through these sorts of transformations to have this as an immediate part of their initial MVP or MTP or whatever they would like to call it, where because effectively the data is no good from 2 days after you've collected it, unless you've got the ability to keep it up to date. And what we also find from a controls perspective in organizations is that process of contract change, of making sure that those things are recorded and logged in the right way, is usually where a whole series of control weaknesses and failings are found. We regularly see a scenario where people have got their original contract, but then have agreed 5 or 6 different things via email and somewhere else. So one of the massive benefits that you can drive from these programs, just straight off the bat, is being able to put a really sensible, controlled change process in. And one that if any organization is thinking about getting going with this and they haven't got this as one of the immediate items in their backlog, we're immediately jumping in and saying they should be correcting that.
Yeah, and then actually the next thing that we're going to talk about is AI, of course. We've already done our IA, so let's do our AI. This one we're really excited about. It's, if I can get, there we go. This is called our Convo AI Q&A. And what this does, it's not just a chatbot within the CLM. What it is it's an AI nuanced questions. You can ask it beyond just, what's the start date, whatever this information, that's directly into the contract. You can ask it nuanced questions, things like, what is the impact of defaulting on this contract? So that's not necessarily just a straight answer. Also, maybe something it can do the calculations for you. When does this contract end? You might have the contract begin date, and you might have the amount of time the length of the contract, but you don't have an end date. So you can ask it these things, AI, and it goes and it pulls this information and makes an assessment and obviously gives you the answers that you're looking for. This is really exciting, again, because it's not just a straight chatbot. You can really ask the nuances.
Yeah, I think having functionality like this to query contracts is not only a huge time saver for anyone who is managing contracts and needing to spend a lot of time on, manual calculations and reconciling information from different sources, but it is also future proofing. If you think back to the idea of a smart home with integrated systems, any new homeowner would be able to take over and manage everything from that smart home hub. And with contracts, if roles were to change, because they do, and a new contract owner needs to, get their head around what's happening with a set of contracts, there's no longer a need to rely on that manual knowledge transfer in order to get back up to speed. I don't know whether, Alex, you've got any other considerations for this one.
Yeah, and for me, this is sort of going back to that people-centric approach that you need to take with these programs, and this is why I think this is such a brilliant extension of the capabilities of the system, is that a lot of the transformational benefits from a CLM program are often not necessarily felt by the individual users. It's more for the organization as a whole to demonstrate that extra control, to be able to do better reporting, to be able to give management the right information. But actually, this is one of those examples where the individual person who's responsible for that contract itself is able to have a real tangible time saving for them to ask specific questions about the contract and be able to get a really rapid answer and then compare it to the right part of the agreement in order to do that as well. So if you're trying to bring people on the journey, you're trying to explain to them why going down this process of implementing the new system is an absolutely vital thing, and it's going to change their world and change their way of working. This is a fantastic example of how to show them that immediately, and the reaction that we get from stakeholders, business users, people in the front line is always excellent whenever they see this kind of thing, because they can see immediately how it's going to change their day-to-day.
I think we have some key takeaways then.
Yes, we do. So, I think we've covered a lot in a relatively short period of time. It's obviously a complicated question in terms of why are CLM programs mandatory, or becoming more mandatory than perhaps they were. And I think we explained at the beginning, there's a whole series of different regulatory drivers. You've got more regulation over how we manage our supply chains. You've got more scrutiny from external auditors over how you manage your financial transactions and how you justify them. And the complexity here is that produces a more challenging program, a more challenging business case. And how do you address that is critical for many organizations. So with that so the second key point, with that increased cost of failure, where it's we absolutely must deliver on this, otherwise we have challenges around our license to operate as an organization or big regulatory fines coming. You've really got to focus attention on how you set that program up for success. You've got to make sure that it's got the right components, the right individuals that are involved, and that you're prepared to be able to answer challenges all the way through that program lifecycle. And then for me, the third point, critically, what can you do differently in order to make sure that your program does succeed? Really focus on benefits, try and deliver them early if you can. Any kind of work streams that have quick wins attached to them, they're going to really help you in the long run. They're going to help keep people on your side, and they're going to make sure that the program delivers on benefits sooner rather than later. Making sure that you've got the business really clearly articulating what it is that they need to happen in order to meet those requirements. You've got strong business ownership directly in your program, whether that's through product ownership or whether that's through excellent business analysts. And then lastly, if you're ever going to get any of these systems to answer their business case, adoption is the number one thing that you've got to focus on. So if you don't design something that is going to make people's life easier, there's no way that you're going to satisfy your business case and your objectives. So making sure that user-centric approach is throughout all of your design thinking and all of your implementation thinking is an absolute critical thing for us as well. So I think with that, probably brings us to the end of our material and over into some Q&A.
Yes, we do have a couple of questions here. Let's see, where do you start when it comes to building a business case for CLM?
Maybe I can start, and then Alex, obviously feed in with your thoughts as well. I think there are probably a few variables to this depending on your current, I would say, CLM maturity. But generally speaking, I would say there are 4 core components: your why, your what, your how, and your who. So let's start with the why. Why is a CLM needed? Are there pain points that need to be addressed? And hopefully after today's webinar, you'll be able to answer this one pretty easily. The next is your what. So what does the future state actually look like? And what are the key benefits? Your how is all about how will you make this happen? How long will you need? And what does your timeline actually look like to make this happen? And then finally, it's the who. So who does this impact? Who does this benefit? And who will you need to be involved to make this a success? I don't know whether, Alex, you've got any other thoughts for this one.
Yeah, and I think one of the other areas that we encourage organizations to think about at the business case phase is also what are the potential challenges, roadblockers, and how are you going to get through them? So organizations don't tend to just do a CLM program in isolation. There tend to be other activities going on at the same time that will affect it. Helping identify and understand those at the beginning, giving people confidence over how you're going to work alongside other programs, I think is a real critical part of that benefits case. And then secondly, for me, it's making sure when we have a regulatory driver that is correctly represented in that business case, that the individuals that would be affected, that the consequences of not satisfying that regulation, the costs involved of satisfying it in a different way, whether it's through a short-term tactical solution or whether it's from a really over manual approach to generating the information, that those issues are really quantified. So there's a question of, if we don't deliver this to meet that regulatory driver, what are the consequences and what are the alternatives for us, and make sure that that's properly explored and articulated. Quite a lot. Again, business cases are something of a real something close to my heart. So we could probably go on for hours about what goes into a good business case, but hopefully a few examples there.
All right. Another question here. How do you get a high-risk business case approved?
So that's an interesting one in itself, right? So again, as we was pointing out earlier on, sort of higher, the consequences of not succeeding on these business cases are great and severe to organizations. So how do you make sure that people are all bought into that, and that you can get that, that get your approvers, get your funders comfortable that this is the right response and this program is going to deliver within the timeframes that it needs to. So I think a huge part of that is that kind of senior stakeholder engagement, making sure that they're involved early, articulating to them the challenge and the consequences of no action, and getting them brought in from day one and keeping them involved through the right governance, I think is a real critical thing, and showing them that you've thought about that in terms of the structure of the program from the beginning. And then I think the second thing for me is having, through your governance, the right kind of controls in place as well, so that at the right point in time, you can have sensible milestones which demonstrate how you're going to deliver value, not jam tomorrow, but there's, frankly, jam all the way from month 1 of the program. And I think, with those two things combined, you'll get people more comfortable with the higher risk, the consequence, the making sure that this is that this is delivered early, and that will help you later on in the program as well. I don't know, any other thoughts on that one, Erika?
No, I think you covered it very, very well.
Cool.
Okay, there is a question about let's see. Question, as well as actual customer supplier agreements, can CLM easily be used to check M&A banking documents for issues such as change of control and restrictive covenants? Yeah.
So I'll talk sort of generically from a kind of a what would entail, what that challenge would entail, right? So all kinds of documentation is effectively just strings of text, and I think ultimately the sorts of tools and the AI systems that CLM platforms, Agiloft included, now have access to allows you to go through those documents, identify the key aspects of that text that's super valuable to you, and to then have some business rules off the back of it, which will give a different pathway, a triage from the back of it. So they absolutely can be used for that kind of activity, but I would also think carefully about what that long-term future is, as Erika was mentioning from the business case question. Is this something that you want as part of your day-to-day management of those controls, or of those documentation, or is that just a one-off exercise? And then you've got to make the right decision as to whether a platform is the right way to go, or whether it's an experiment for perhaps your data science team. But fundamentally, it's the same technology that underpins all of it. It's the platform that and the overall ways of working that you've got to think about.
Yes, it'd be, yeah, the integrations and what you want to do with the system. We hear this a lot with Agiloft. It's actually a double-edged sword. It's so flexible that you can really set up any integration, any workflow that you want to do. But it's also that makes it also so very powerful. Okay, there's one more question about CLM solution able to cover the GDPR register, and I guess if it's within a contract, the I cannot say that GDPR language. Of course, it can be tracked, and it's considered an obligation, and how is it is it being met or not met? So it's really how you set up the system. I don't know, Alex, if you have any more on that.
I think again, it's what questions do you want to ask about the system, about the agreement? Is that if this is a matter of are we asking which of our suppliers are going to be data processors and which of our suppliers are going to be data controllers? That's a contracting challenge, and it may also be about what we're including in the document in terms of how data is flowing. So if you've developed the logic, the questions, the business rules for what would allow you to identify each of those different suppliers as one or the other as per GDPR rules. Again, with a system like Agiloft, with the flexibility of your AI, with the workflows, then yes, by all means. And we see that as being one of the sort of key drivers over the last couple of years of organizations wanting to make sure that they're complying with GDPR in the right way by having that logged as part of their CLM solution.
Yeah, and also if it is about data residency, we do solve for that. So there you go. All right. Any other thoughts? I think we're good with our questions. If not, we have a poll that we'd like y'all to take at the very end, if you don't mind. I'm going to stop sharing. I think that's how this poll works. And it's really just about if you're interested in reaching out or having us reach out and answer any questions. If there's any other thoughts there, that would be great. And if you can just go ahead and click on there. I want to thank Alex and Erika. Thank you so much for your time. I've certainly enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully we get to do some other fun webinars again together soon.
Absolutely, Alison. Thank you. It's a privilege to be here, and really appreciated the invite.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.